So do feel free to sort of take a few notes as we go along, but bear in mind we'll be recording. And we will also be inviting you to post questions into the chat feature. The way we're going to run this is we will run through the presentations from the various presenters here today, and then at the end of the session, around about 3:20, we're going to go into a Q&A environment, and I will be taking the questions from the chat area and reading them out on your behalf, and hopefully we'll be answering those as we go through. Okay, so Kickstart was launched by the government before anybody else was ready. And I think we've probably all recognized that. And I'll be totally transparent with you. As a Chamber of Commerce, we were slightly surprised when we started getting phone calls from businesses saying, I understand that you can take registrations for the Kickstart program and we can apply through you. For the first few hours of that morning, we had no idea what people were talking about. And then we looked into the press release and we saw that the Chambers of Commerce had been cited as an example of one of the potential gateway organizations that could be used for people that wanted to take on a replacement and had fewer than 30 vacancies. That, I think, essentially set the tone, I think, for this program going forward. We were very quickly inundated, and therefore we set up an expression of interest page, because what we didn't want to do is to leave the employers and the businesses that we were dealing with hanging. And more importantly, we recognize the value and the principles behind this particular program. And so we're very keen to make sure that the opportunities that you were willing to present or offer for young people were not passed up and lost just because of a lack of effort on our part. So we have been diligently gathering your details and registering your interest and the vacancies that you have, and then continually working with the Department for Work and Pensions to try and help put all of this process together. Now, I would also say that having worked with Eileen, who you're going to hear from shortly, and other members of the Department for Work and Pensions team, they too were caught out slightly in that they were handed the money by the Treasury and then told to get on with it. In the meantime, the press releases were being issued. So they too have been sort of clambering away, trying to get things up to speed. And I think in the current climate, all of us can probably afford to be patient and give a little bit of generosity in terms of the sort of the pace at which things are being implemented around here. Wheels of government ordinarily turn slowly anyway, because it's a big machine. And when you're trying to do things at pace, it can be problematic, to say the least. And I would like to just acknowledge the frustrations that some of you who are registered with us as a chamber, as a gateway organisation, and who are also perhaps registered with other gateway organisations, we are very aware of the frustrations that you face. We feel them on your behalf, and we are very patiently and doggedly working through all of the issues that you have on your behalf to try and make sure that this program is a success that we know it will be. What that means is that over the next hour or so, you will hear things which perhaps you weren't anticipating or weren't expecting or perhaps weren't aware of. That's no fault of yours, and that's certainly no fault of the speakers and the presenters we have with you today. We are learning this as we go along. So I would ask you to be patient. If you have questions, please try and keep them constructive and positive. But equally, we do understand the frustrations you face. And obviously, if there are particular concerns you have, we're more than happy to try and address them during the course of this session. That's enough of me playing the politician and trying to backslide out of what's been a tricky start to this program. Let's get on with the real details here. Okay, so I'd like to introduce you to our first speaker. This is Eileen Bishop, who is an absolute legend as far as we're concerned here in Kent, because she has been doing a tremendous job in trying to sort through things on our behalf and work with us for the benefit of all of you businesses. Eileen is the employer engagement manager for Kent, and I'm now going to hand over to her, who's got some presentations to share with you. Eileen, over to you.
Thank you, Tudor. I suppose firstly, I just want to concur with some of the comments that Tudor made around the frustrations that I'm sure that you all feel in relation to the scheme and the slow movement of the wheels of government. I think for us, we were, as Tudor mentioned, completely caught off guard as well. We weren't anticipating the speed at which we had to implement the scheme, even though we know it was in the offing. We weren't given a date until literally a week before. And equally, we weren't anticipating the avalanche of applications we've had. And as a national team, they're currently at 300,000 applications to get through. So we are putting more resource on that national team, and we're slowly trying to pull it back. So as Tudor said, bear with us. It's been it's been an unprecedented amount of applications on the back of us having obviously staff working from home still. Our shielding staff is still able to, not all coming into the office. So there's a whole load of other issues on top of the mainstay one, which is obviously the volume of applications. So I thought I would start doing the background of Kickstart. I'm sure you're already aware of all this, but I thought that might be the best way to start. So, okay, thank you, Molly. So we move on to the next slide. Okay, so the Kickstart scheme was launched on the 8th of July under the Plan for Jobs, and there was a number of initiatives announced under the Plan for Jobs, of which Kickstart was one. So it's a £2 billion scheme, and it's aimed at 16 to 24-year-olds in the intention of offering a 6-month job placement at 25 hours per week. The government funds the 6-month job placement, paying the wages for 25 hours a week at the national minimum wage, and it also includes the national insurance contributions and the pension contributions. So there's also a £1,500 payment up front, and that's given to the employer or the gateway organisation to help with onboarding, training, etc. The Chamber of Commerce is a gateway organisation, and I'll explain a little bit further in the slides what the role of the gateway organisation plays in terms of Kickstart. So the idea was that the Kickstart jobs would commence in November 2020. We currently have probably about 19,000 jobs nationally loaded on the system. As I say, we are slowly trying to pull all those back and get ahead of ourselves. The potential end date of the last person to start a Kickstart program will be 2021 December, because the scheme itself is due to end in June 2022. So that gives those last cohort of placements time to finish. The aim was for 250,000 young people to take up a Kickstart job placement. So as I say, we've got 300,000 applications already, but that doesn't mean to say they'll all go through. But we weren't expecting it all up front, to be honest, but that's where we are at the moment. Molly, next slide. Thank you. So who can apply for funding to be part of the Kickstart scheme? Any employer who can meet the Kickstart criteria can sign up to get the funding. And the way they've set the criteria, it's around whether the company is registered at Companies House, must have been trading for over a year, must be financially stable. Currently, sole traders and partnerships are excluded. However, they are looking into that and at ways of how they can include sole traders and partnerships in the future. So if you're an employer with over 30 vacancies, you can apply direct on the DirectGov's website. If you have less than 30 vacancies, you would be expected to approach a gateway organisation, and the gateway organisation will pull together the bid on your behalf. So there's a list of gateway organisations. You're probably already familiar with them: local authorities, Chamber of Commerce, local providers, etc. So Molly, next slide. Thank you. So what type of vacancies are we considering on the scheme? We welcome all vacancies from a broad range of sectors, and we would like vacancies from a broad range of sectors to mirror the sort of job opportunities our young people are looking for. So we wouldn't necessarily want a lot of jobs in one sector. We're welcoming job vacancies from various sectors. The vacancies should require minimum training, so we don't want somebody to take a 6-month placement and they've got 3 months of training to do to enable them to do the role. Vacancies can have the prospect of a job at the end, but it's not necessary. This is meant to be an additional post that you've created in your business. And apprenticeships are obviously something that can be taken up by the Kickstart employee afterwards if you have the capacity to offer an apprenticeship at the end of the placement. Each placement does need to include an element of employability support, and I will cover that a little bit later. Next slide, please, Molly. So for who is eligible for Kickstart, as I mentioned earlier, it's actually 18 to 24-year-olds on universal credit who are deemed to be at risk of long-term unemployment. Universal credit is the benefit that replaced a number of benefits six or 7 years ago now, I suppose. And they're the majority of where our young people are. That's the benefit the majority of our young people are claiming. And I think for Kent, we have something like 14,000 young people who are currently on universal credit who would be in the scope for Kickstart. It's also open to 16 to 18-year-olds who are not in education, training, or employment. We haven't yet come across how that process will look like, but because we're starting with the 18 to 24-year-olds and universal credit, but that will come out shortly. And the reason we're looking at young people was in the last recession, it was recognized that there was almost a generation of young people who were left behind. So those with skills or previous employment history were the first to obviously take up employment. Young people who had virtually no work history and no track record, no references, etc., were the ones that were left behind. So this Kickstart scheme and a number of the other initiatives under the Plan for Jobs are aimed at not having the same situation this time around. So the candidates will be selected by a work coach in the job centre. Every person who's claiming universal credit will have a work coach. So the work coach will be the one who will be supporting that young person into work and ultimately into the Kickstart placement. And vacancies will be advertised on the internal DWP universal credit system. So that's the primary channel for advertising those Kickstart placements. Molly, next slide, please. Thank you. So how will young people be recruited for Kickstart? As I mentioned, there will be young people aged 18 to 24 on universal credit, and their jobs centre work coach will be the one who will select the best candidates for your job roles. So we will follow whatever recruitment practice or channel you want to use. A lot of employers are using CV applications. So it could well be that it's we select the candidate and then they need to go and put forward their CV. When the work coach submits someone for the placement, the employer will get an email with the name of the candidate and a unique identifying number. That unique identifying number is important as it will notify our national team of who's been taken on, and it's to do with tracking, but it's also to do with GDPR, so for security. And then employers will interview and recruit the best young person for the role. So it's like in a normal recruitment process, really. It's just that you get that unique identifying number attached to the candidate. Next slide. Thank you, Molly. So what are we expecting young people to get while on Kickstart? They obviously need on-the-job training to do the role that's been advertised. We would hope they would get some skills development and support in the workplace, such as mentoring. Also, of course, soft skills. We know young people sometimes lack work ethic and understanding of how to behave in a work environment. So these placements are hopefully teaching them as well as around things like attendance, timekeeping, teamwork. And also we're looking for the young person to get support into looking for long-term work, which includes career advice, setting goals, help with job hunting, getting their CV prepared and giving them interview preparation. So it's almost like an employability wraparound service we would expect the young person to get while they're in the placement, alongside the actual skills to do the role. Next slide, please, Molly. So what are the responsibilities of a Kickstart employer? So the Kickstart participant, for all intents and purposes, is actually treated like a regular employee. So all your HR processes, code of conduct, behavior, everything else will be as you would expect from your other employees, and you will be using the same policy. You would be expected to provide the skills to do the role. And then, of course, you need to consider how we would provide the employability support. So there's various ways of doing that, but I'll just outline the main part of the employability support you'd be expected to provide. So again, as I mentioned, the soft skills, attendance, timekeeping, and teamwork, and the support for long-term work, including job hunting, CV, and interview preparations, etc. I have included a link to the National Career site. There is some support materials there that could help a young person to identify their goals, and also CV tips and interview prep. So I've included that site there. That's a free advice site available to every adult in England. Next slide, please, Molly. Right, so gateway organization. How does someone become a gateway organization? Any organization can apply to become a gateway organization as long as they meet the requirement, which is their experience of managing partnerships and robust financial and governance processes to manage the applications on behalf of the small and medium employers. All applications to become a gateway organisations are scrutinised by a DW panel, and bids will only be awarded to those gateway organisations who pass this scrutiny. So we're being very careful about who we give the gateway organisation status to. It has to be somebody who has got a proven track record and financial stability to be able to manage the partnership and the governance process. As an employer, you can choose whichever gateway organization you would like. There's a list of those gateway organizations that have been approved on .gov. But also the DWP will be monitoring the quality of service delivered by gateway organizations. So we will be looking to ensure that the process is being followed correctly and that gateway organizations are delivering what's been outlined in their agreement with us. Next slide, please, Molly. So the role, what is the role of a gateway organisation? The gateway organisation is responsible for checking that the jobs employers are offering fit the criteria for Kickstart, and they're new jobs and they don't just replace existing jobs or planned jobs. They also need to ensure the Kickstart placement would not lead to an existing employee losing their job or for an existing employee to start working less hours. They would check that each role is a minimum of 25 hours a week at the national minimum wage. As an employer, you can offer to pay more for the placement to the participant, but as I said, the criteria is 25 hours per week at the national minimum wage. We're also checking, the gateway would also check that each role requires basic skill sets and that training is provided. And also around the support the employer will offer to the participant to ensure they become more employable, mentoring, help to look for work, etc. And I know gateway organisations are looking at that, each in their own sort of way, specific way, in terms of how that could also be delivered. Molly, next slide, please. So for an employer using a gateway organisation, the employer selects the candidate and informs the gateway and DWP of the start date. So the young person has been identified by the work coach, has applied for the job. The employer has selected the person they want, and they inform the gateway organisation and ultimately ourselves of the start date. DWP will then pay the gateway organisation £300 for each placement, plus the £1,500 upfront onboarding costs, and that's paid in week 1 of the placement starting. To confirm that the person has started on their Kickstart placement, we will be checking the HMRC real-time information. So as an employer loads the person on the PAYE system, we will then be using that as confirmation that the person has actually started. The wages will be paid to the gateway organisation, and the gateway organisation is then responsible for paying the wages to the employer. The wages are paid at week 5 for the first month. So the person is employed for a month. The employer pays the wages to the participant, and then the gateway organisation reimburses them. So they're paid, sorry, in week 6. I think I might have a slight typo there, but first wages are paid on week 6, and then they're paid monthly after that, the week after each monthly payday. I hope that makes sense actually, but it is literally the payday has come up, the participant has been paid, and then the employer just claims that back the following week from the gateway organisation. And here's just another timeline of the payments. So again, as I say, the first payment is to the employer is the £1,500 payment for the initial setup costs, etc. And then the second and third and 7 payments are following on from that. Okay, next slide. If the person ceases to be employed by the employer as part of the Kickstart during any month, the payment for that month will be reduced accordingly. So if the person has done 3 weeks, we'll obviously only be paying for those 3 weeks' pay, and the rest of the month then will not be reimbursed. So the national minimum wage for those 3 weeks, plus the related national insurance contributions and automatic enrolment contributions will be paid, but for obvious reasons, then that will be the cut-off date, and no further payments will be made for any period after the employee has left. I am not 100% sure what happens if the participant doesn't start. So if it's, the participant hasn't started and we have to restart the process again. But I'm trying to find that out, in particular in relation to the gateway organisation, actually, not so much in relation to the employer. And I think, next slide, Molly. So when the gateway organisation gets its gateway status, and I know the Chamber has got that status, there is a requirement to fill in a job template for every single vacancy that's being advertised. So as an employer, you'll be expected to fill in all the details of the job placement. So here's a copy of the template and what it looks like. So as you can see, there's places for the job placement summary. So that's a little bit about the job. We've got the title. We've got the essential skills and qualifications, number of hours per week. And if you go to the next slide, Molly, and it also asks for more exact details. So for all intents and purposes, this is almost like the job description, and it also it gives you the opportunity to tell us how you want the applicant to apply, whether it's by CV and who should that CV go to, whether it's by application form on your website. Equally, it gives you the opportunity to tell us how many referrals you would want for one particular role. I often think that for one role, you probably need about, between 10, 15 referrals for one vacancy. Sometimes young people are not as committed. Sometimes they look at the job and they think that's for them, and then they go home and they don't really send their CV in. So I always say, because we're dealing potentially with young people and those furthest away from the labour market, I think you would be looking at maybe 10 to 15 referrals. So when our system hits those 15 referrals, then it will suspend the vacancy. So just to make you aware that whatever number you put in there, that's when we suspend the vacancy. And that gives you then time to look at those referrals and see if you've got any suitable candidates. So I think on that one, yeah. So this is just a little bit more explanation of what the information that will be needed for the job template and why, and how important it is that you make sure you're quite specific, as if you were advertising a job yourself, to ensure that we've got all the information and to make sure that the work coach can screen in potential candidates effectively. I think, is that the last slide? It is. Thank you, Molly.
Thank you very much indeed, Eileen. That's great. Excellent. Quite a bit to take on board there, and it's great to see that the questions are starting to fly in now. We're coming through. If you will bear with us, because we've got some good questions, but I also want to just try and bring in the training providers here as well, just so you understand the full picture. And then we'll sort of dive into the Q&A session, and we'll try and get through as many of the questions as we can. And it'll also give Eileen a chance just to scan some of them to sort of have some answers before we turn to her. So I'm just going to try and change the context slightly here. So we've heard from Eileen, and she's been talking to you very much from the perspective of the DWP and the Kickstart program as a whole. Now, I would certainly say the majority of you on this call here are registered with the Chamber as a gateway organisation. And it's that context in which I'd now like to move forward. So we can talk specifically around the Chamber's offer, how we will be delivering the gateway organisation. And at that juncture, I'd just like to introduce you to someone else that's on the call with us today, a lady called Lauren Payne. She has joined us as our Kickstart account manager, and hopefully many of you will have already had some communication with Lauren, who is obviously going to be your primary point of contact here at the Chamber for the programme moving forward. Do you want to just say hello there, Lauren?
Yeah, thanks so much, Tudor. It's kind of nice to put some faces to some names and things on this call. So yeah, thanks to Eileen. That was a brilliant run through of kind of the process to date. Yeah, so if you've got any queries, I'll be on the other end of the Kickstart email. So just give me a shout. I'm here to answer as many of them as I can. And yeah, I look forward to working with you all going forward. Thanks.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Lauren. Thank you. Okay, so before we move on to Emma, who I'm going to introduce, we have as a Chamber subscribed to the principles here, and as Eileen pointed out, there are lessons learned from the 2008 when there was a large number of young people who were left languishing unemployed, and that's not good for society. It's not good for the future. It's not good for the economy. And so we are completely on board and support the principles of this particular program, and therefore we were very keen to ensure that the less scrupulous businesses out there that just saw this as a grant that they could get hold of, and had to employ someone as well just to get hold of the grant, didn't really get a look in, because it's really about making sure that the right thing is done by the individual, and that the employer and the business also benefits from that young person. So we partnered with the further education colleges of Kent, of which we have 3: East Kent, North Kent and Mid Kent, and also colleagues of ours, Social Enterprise Kent, who have a particular area of expertise in working with social enterprises, charities and the such. And so we've been working with them over the last few weeks, developing an in-work training support package, which we feel is essential to complement this program. And yes, there will be a charge. We are undecided exactly what that charge will be, but I can assure you it will be less than the 50% of the grant money that you are currently offered under the £1,500. So I can at least assure you of that much. And we are still just ironing out the final details, but we're quite keen that we provide this wraparound support so that you as an employer can enjoy the benefits of the support college, who not only have the additional programs such as apprenticeships, traineeships, and a whole host of other programs and training sessions that they can introduce to you, but that you as an employer will really sort of get the full benefit of this program, as will the young person that's working for you. So on that point, I'm now going to introduce you to Emma Woodward from Social Enterprise Kent, who are one of our partnered training providers. And Emma's going to just sort of briefly talk through the sort of training provision that they are proposing to put forward. Emma.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Tudor, for that introduction. I'm going to apologise in advance for any echoing. I've been redeployed to the kitchen to avoid any distractions from children. So I do apologise in advance. But yeah, thank you again as well, Eileen, for feeding us some information about where we're at as a Kickstart scheme. And it's good to know that despite the massive volume of applications you've had, all the DWP guys and all the Kickstart scheme team are cracking on and trying to get things moving forward to help businesses, and obviously gateway organisations support businesses as well locally, which is fantastic. So first of all, I thought I'd introduce myself. So like Tudor mentioned, my name's Emma Woodward. I've worked in employability for just under 10 years. So delivered employability support to adults, young people is very familiar to myself, and also to Social Enterprise Kent, who the organisation I work for. I'm going to attempt to share my screen now. So let's make sure this works okay for everybody. Okay. Lauren, can you just give me a thumbs up if it's worked?
That is working, yes.
Oh, fantastic. Excellent, lovely. So just to give you a bit of brief overview for those who don't know who Social Enterprise Kent are. So we're a local social enterprise. I've been going for around 35 years, and our ethos is improving lives and supporting communities. So at the heart of everything we do it with a social impact in mind. So we're a KIC, which is a community interest company. So any money that we generate through our training, we're essentially a training provider, but any money or income we generate through grant funding or commercial training, all that money, every penny goes back into the community and supporting adults, education, employability, and the community in general. So for instance, the Kickstart scheme was a perfect opportunity to invest some of our monies into delivering the wraparound or in-work employability support, as it's been referred to, for the Kickstart scheme. And that's what led to Tudor and I having conversations about SEK supporting the Chamber as a in-work support, employability support provider for your Kickstart placements. So what SEK are going to offer your business? So we already work with a wide range of small to medium-sized businesses and VCC organisations. Some of you may have come across us before, offering you some business advice, business support, or working with some of your service users or local residents to help them improve their lives or their situation or access services and things like that. But for the Kickstart scheme, more specifically, working with the Chamber, we will manage, deliver and evidence all the wraparound support employability support for all your Kickstart placements on your behalf of your business. And we'll also work with the business and the young people on the scheme to identify any suitable progression opportunities, but also how they can maximise their opportunity with you in that placement, because like Eileen mentioned, and also Tudor's mentioned as well, the Kickstart scheme is supposed to be meaningful for the young person, but also meaningful for the employer as well, because of course while they're with you, getting the experience and the skills that they need to become more employable in the future, either with yourselves or onto another organisation, it's also a perfect opportunity for employers to have that free resource and the opportunity to shape a young person and empower them to become employable. So what we'll do in a nutshell, and I will break it down for you, is we'll offer 6 online sessions delivered over the 6-month period. So of course, one thing we decided initially was, of course, they're not going to, the main experience they're going to get is being with you in person in the workplace, and learning those skills and getting that experience. So what we'll do everything remotely, given the current climate that we currently are living in. Everything is online. But for those individuals who perhaps can't access online, or for those sectors where IT work isn't necessarily within the job role, we can look at that on a case-by-case basis. So across the 6 months placement, it'll be around 14 hours of wraparound employability support and 4 hours of voluntary networking. And the reason why we've included the 4 hours of voluntary networking is one thing we have learned as an employability provider is peers working together and supporting one another in an unfamiliar situation perhaps is really useful and can be very powerful, knowing you're not the only one who's had their first week at work, or you're not the only one who's noticed a situation in the workplace and not sure how to deal with it, because it's all very new. So we do feel like it really doesn't empower, peer-to-peer working does really empower young people and build on their confidence, if anything else. And the sessions will be run in the employees' working hours. So we are going to aim to keep them as minimal as possible, on the basis that, of course, we'll be giving them advice and mentoring support as they go. But the biggest impact that is going to be had on these younger people is being in work and actively involved in their job role. So I'll break it down for you so it's a bit clearer and it's understandable, but of course I'm happy to answer any questions a bit later on. But for the first month, we will focus on welcoming them to the workplace. So that'll be about an hour long session, and we'll also offer 3 e-learning online accredited training courses, which will cover equality and diversity, introduction to GDPR, and health and safety. And we chose those 3 because they do cover a very broad range of sectors. However, having said that, if there is any other additional training that you think that Kickstart worker could benefit from, for instance, working at heights or working within a hazardous environment, dealing with food hygiene, things like that, do bring it to our attention through your gateway organisation, being the chamber, and we can look at providing those ad hoc training courses for you as well in the Kickstart worker. So within the first month, we'll look about how they can make the most of this opportunity, make sure that they are prepared and they're confident to walk into that workplace on their first day, to make sure they know what to expect and how to make the most of the opportunity as well. And also we'll be highlighting to them, obviously, just a basic code of conduct, professionalism and things like that. And if the employer had any specific things that they would want us to cover, for instance, if they're working in a place where they may be meeting vulnerable people, we can obviously address those on a one-to-one basis and make sure we're giving them the best bespoke induction, if you like, as possible. But of course, as the employer in the business, you'll be inducting them into your workplace as well. And in month 2, so we would contact them in month 2 and set up a 2-hour session to have a look at developing CVs and cover letters. Now, it's not as easy as it sounds. For some people who have never written a CV before, or doesn't even know what one looks like, it can be quite daunting to do. So we would do a workshop where we'd talk about the pros and cons about a CV, and good tips and techniques on how to write a CV, how it's structured, and what is the reason of using a cover letter? Why do we have one, or how do we make the most of that opportunity to sell yourself before the employer sees your CV? And the reason why we do that is because we find that writing CVs can be a real confidence booster for participants, Kickstart placement, young people, because sometimes they always think, well, I don't know what to put on the CV, I've never done anything. Well, of course, we all know that's not the case. Everyone's got skills that they can definitely utilise and sell on a piece of paper to an employer what would make them a good employee. But also we use this as an opportunity for them to, they've been in the role for a month, so we'll use this opportunity as well to say, right, you've been with this employer for a month, what have you learned? And we can also test their knowledge, I suppose, in a way to make sure that they are making the most of the opportunity, they are doing exactly what the job description said, and they are making, and it is meaningful to them. And if they've also learned other things as well, which is great to use as well. And we'd also send them an invitation to attend a 2-hour optional networking event, which is where I mentioned about the peer-to-peer support working. And you know, we would lead that with themes and topics and things like that to encourage conversation. It will be virtual, so it will probably, at first there'll probably be a bit of silence. We'd have to encourage people to step up to the platform and speak if you like. But we're quite good at that. You know, we're quite a friendly organisation. We try to keep it very light-hearted and informal on occasions to try and make people feel comfortable and at ease and willing to participate as much as they can, to get out of it as much as they can as well. So in month 3, so after I've been with you for 3 months now, we'd look at confidence building and interview preparation and techniques, because by this point, they're almost halfway through their placement with you. We're hoping that their confidence would have soared slightly. They would have been able to achieve things and do things they never thought they'd been able to do before. And we'd start looking at, you know, preparing them for the hopefully unlikely chance, but, you know, there could be a chance that they may not be staying with you as an organisation and applying for other jobs with other organisations as well. So let's look at interview techniques and obviously how to handle pre-interview nerves, things like that, tips and techniques, how to answer challenging questions, how to actually respond to different interviews, because of course, again, another good thing that this year has presented us is the new way of interviewing online or even over the phone, using Skype, what have you, which is all very new to a lot of organisations and individuals. So we'll be covering all those aspects, and how to effectively research companies and things like that. But whilst we're doing this, we'll always do it from you as the employer's perspective. So if a Kickstart placement worker was working for SEK, we would kind of conduct the practice interview as if they were being interviewed by their employer that they're with at the moment, because I think that's a really good way to encourage them to reflect on what they've learned, really think about what's being asked and put it into context, and it really does help empower them to become more confident when it comes to any future interviews with any other employers for that matter. So by month 4, we will be looking at one-to-one job searching techniques, completing applications. And the reason why we do one-to-one is, again, because we're trying to keep it very sector or even employment specific. So if some individuals have gone into a role, like I say, that involved food hygiene, we would really look at, you know, the food catering industry and focus their job search techniques on using key buzzwords and things like that to look for, and to kind of really focus on making the job search session as meaningful for them as possible, to make the most out of it. Because again, by this point at month 4, I assume there may be some conversations being had whether or not you think there may be an opportunity for the Kickstart worker to start with you, but in the event that there isn't, they can come to us as their employability provider to kind of set up the next opportunity for them in the unfortunate event that they won't be able to stay with yourselves. So that's what we would be looking at. Month 5, again, we'll do another one-to-one digital support searching session where we would be actively applying for jobs. You know, what have we applied for? What have we looked at? How do we chase it up, etc. And what have been the learning and challenges again? And alongside that, there'll be another option for a 2-hour networking session, peer-to-peer support network group for the participants as well, where again, they can share different ideas and what other jobs, or even share what jobs have been available they've noticed that they've applied for and things like that. And by month 6, which is probably a really important month, again, this will be one-to-one. We'll be looking at them exiting from the Kickstart scheme. And I must caveat as well, throughout this whole 6-month placement, I know you'll be liaising with Lauren, and Lauren will be kindly liaising with me about how else we could cater our support as we go for the employer as well. So making sure, again, it's meaningful for the Kickstart worker, but it's also still very meaningful for you as the employer. So for instance, when we were looking at interview techniques, if you had an inkling that maybe you would like to take them on, but you want them to test their learning, we could share with you, you know, kind of how they got on at their interview and things like that. So you can help them work on from the feedback where they need to focus on more, or different areas they need to look at more, or different tasks they need to really kind of get their fingers into a bit more as well. So on month 6, we'll be looking at them exiting the program. So at this point, we'll again look at their CV and everything and kind of remind them what they've learned, what they've gained. It was a meaningful placement, and it's definitely a good opportunity for them to take full advantage of, which is fantastic. But in the event that obviously they're not going to be staying with yourselves, we'd look at volunteer opportunities, traineeships, apprenticeships, looking at going self-employed, alongside obviously continuing the job search as well. In the event that obviously, of course, they're not keen on any of these ideas, or they're not quite in the right position at the moment, or they want to continue looking for sustainable employment, which of course we want for all of our young people, we would then offer them the opportunity to come and work with SEK on our employability projects, to offer that one-to-one support ongoing until they achieve sustainable employment or enrol onto a particular course or training given from the experience they've received with the employers. So again, all the support we aim to deliver, we don't want to kind of just stop it there at the 6 months, as if to say, you know, you've done your placement, off you go. We want to continue supporting them for as long as possible to make sure that we can continue to help reduce the unemployment rate, long-term unemployed, and prevent risks of young people being on the universal credit longer period than they need to be. So that was kind of it really from us, and sorry to keep it fairly brief, but I suppose essentially I think employability support, there's not really much discussed. The proof is in the pudding, if you like. You know, we will give as much as a bespoke service we possibly can to employers, working with the chamber. And I do think the scheme is fantastic, and if you haven't already considered, or you're brainstorming of what different ideas or placements you can come up with to help your business, do consider them before you kind of think, oh, actually it's not worth it. Because you know, a role that you're doing at the moment, and perhaps a role that you're looking for someone for, do give them the opportunity, because you'll be surprised when you give people the challenge, younger people the challenge, they really do rise to it, in my experience. And nothing's more meaningful than obviously investing your time and your work into somebody else, a younger person, who can then later on in the line come back round, you never know, and see you as an adult and they're fully qualified, or because of the input you had in that 6 months period. So really do consider the scheme. And if you've got any questions, I'll be happy to answer toward the end of the meeting. Thanks, Tudor.
Emma, thank you very much indeed. That's very kind and very comprehensive outline of the this provision offer that you're looking to provide, and one of the reasons why obviously we've partnered with you going forward. Lots of questions coming in, which is great. And again, as I suspected, a lot of what you're hearing today will come as news. And we recognize that, but again, we've been learning and discovering ourselves, and having to sort of make a few decisions along the way. And this is really our opportunity to share that with you. And so we will be sort of going into a deep dive with these questions later on. But as you can see, the level of in-work support for some of these individuals is going to be absolutely critical to sort of helping them become real sort of future contributors to the economy moving forward. And again, there are specific questions that have been asked around the quality of the training and who's delivering it, and whether this is optional or whether it's compulsory. And again, we'll talk about that in a bit more detail. But before we do, I'd like to move across now to our next speaker, which is James Egan from Mid-Kent College. And if you remember, we have partnered with the 3 colleges for Kent, so we're going to hear from each one in turn. Who said you could outline what it is that they do, and obviously specifically with around the future, because of course a lot of these placements, hopefully they will prove themselves, and then you'll feel compelled to employ them full time and maybe offer them apprenticeship or something else. And again, the colleges are really sort of well placed to help you with that sort of thing as well. So without further ado, James, can I invite you to step forward?
Thank you, Tudor, and good afternoon, everybody. As Tudor said, I'm James Egan, and I work for Mid-Kent College, but today I'm representing the KFE, which is the Kent Further Education Group, which is the 3 main colleges in Kent: North Kent, Mid Kent, and of course East Kent College. And we've been working collaboratively in line with the Invicta Chambers, JCP, and our aim is to work with the Kickstart candidates and you as the employers to create a really effective program which benefits both our job seekers and the employers, while supporting critical social action around young people that are currently facing a pretty rough time, you know, with the impact of COVID-19. What we have been working on is a 3-stage process, which will be specific to the individual, but also it wouldn't matter where they go. So if they come to North Kent, if they come to East Kent, or if they come to West Kent, they get the same level of service. And that's what we're very good at offering as a group of colleges. And we collaborate over lots of different things as a KFE group. And this is just another example of how we're able to do that successfully. So initially, we would be working with a young person around a training needs analysis, and we estimate that would be approximately 90 minutes. And that would be conducted through an online meeting platform, and that could involve the Kickstarter and you as the employee if you felt that was appropriate. The purpose of that initial meeting is around providing advice and guidance for that individual. They're going to be, as we said before, they're going to be quite far away from the jobs market, and I'm guessing they're going to come with a few fears, hopefully some hopes and aspirations as well. And it's our job really to try and tease them out to make sure that we're giving that full service to that young person. We'd look at holistic needs assessment and taking into account their health and well-being, which we know may be a challenge or a barrier to them engaging in employment. We'd undertake an English and Maths and ICT check at that point, and also identify any potential learning and support needs that we feel we could implement as the 6-month programme continues. Moving on to the second phase, so we see this in the mid phase, and remember, as I said, this is what we're offering collectively as a group of colleges. There'll also be add-ons that we'll be doing individually as colleges, because of the complexities of our funding means that we can differentiate, which is a real bonus and a positive. We can differentiate to the individual's needs as they join the Kickstart program. So this will be a 2-day workshop, like I say, that takes place in the middle, and the whole point of there is about reflecting, helping the young person to reflect, working with them around their CV and application and interview techniques, and really getting them ready for that next stage. 6 months isn't a long time, and we'll go quite quickly, and we want to be making sure we're doing everything we can that young person's ready to take them next steps into employment or training. We'll also be looking at some specific career guidance and action planning so that they're fully prepared. Now, the final phase that we would offer then would come in the evaluation and feedback. And again, that could be delivered through online meeting platform, or who knows, we may hopefully be able to do some face-to-face meetings at that point and get back to some sense of normality, which would be fantastic. And we work with that young person on developing the next steps in their career, whether that be with you as the employer into apprenticeship, or actually coming on to one of our apprenticeships at either of the 3 colleges of the KFE group. So that's the 3 phases. Essentially, it's a kind of beginning, a middle and an end to support that person. We feel that we wanted to go with a lighter touch rather than intervening every month, so that you have more time to work with that young person and develop the skills that you need in the workplace to take that person forward, hopefully at the end of their 6-month placement. We can also offer online distance courses. So this is a kind of add-on, and most of these courses hopefully be funded. It depends on the age of the individual, and we've got a plethora of courses that are available to the young person, and this enables us to really tailor the course to the needs of the individual and you as the employer. So if you felt that you needed someone, a course in business administration, principles of team leading, I could go on and on and on. These are level 2 funded courses through a nationally recognised awarding organisation that we can run alongside the 25 hours a week that they're working with you. We can put this into their program so they'll be fully supported for the hours that they're not on the job with you. That really targets the specific needs that they need to take them forward at the end of their Kickstart placement. What I'd like to do now is just hand over to Lara, who is going to then talk about the offer that they have there.
That's great. Thank you very much indeed, James. So we're going to move across to slightly out of sync. So we've got Lara Paul, who's representing North Kent College, who of course recently also took under their wing West Kent College, for those of you that live in the Tunbridge Wells and Sevenoaks area. So Lara, I'm going to come to you next.
Thank you, Tudor, and thank you, James. Yes, as James was saying, we have pulled together this programme so that no matter what your postcode is in the Kent area, there will be the local college who can assist with the wraparound support and employability training that the young person will need, with that starting point of about 90 minutes, the 2 days in the middle, and then the end point, which again would be about half a day. Now, as James was saying, we as individual colleges can then offer additional sort of bolt-on training programs, whether online or face-to-face. And I just wanted to tell you what those additional optional courses are, just in case you need them for the young person to actually be able to work in your organisation. So from North Kent's point of view, we're able to deliver NEBOSH, we can do IOSH, managing safely and working safely. We can do manual handling, first aid at work, emergency first aid at work, basic fire training, the CSCS card, which is a 3-day training course that includes the IOSH training and the exam as well, plus the card delivery. It's all done in 3 days, and the card usually arrives within 2 weeks. We have a food safety certificate that we can deliver as well for those working in catering. And for those in retail, we have a visual merchandising course as well, which includes everything from prime selling spaces to window displays, colour palette analysis, mystery shopping, all sorts of things within retail. And then an employability course as well, which is a 1-day course called Bridging the Gap. And that really is for people who've come straight from school, who need some employability and help transitioning into the workplace. So that's our offer on top of the initial package that James was talking about, that wraparound employability package. We can then add any of those things on if an employer requires it. Thank you.
Lara, thank you very much indeed. And again, I think it just sort of reiterates the sort of depth of provision that the college have above and beyond that in-work support. So it's really, really good and great that we're in partnership. I'm hoping that Hayley is here, although
Kirsty
she might be...
is here, Tudor. Kirsty.
I am here. I am here. I don't know if you can hear me.
Yes, your staff HXB01. We couldn't work out who was staff HXB1, so that's fine.
I've had some real technical problems today, so I do apologise. My sound is very poor, but fortunately I have Kirsty McChesney on the call with me, and she has been very instrumental in developing the programme with the other colleges. So I'm sure Kirsty will chip in as and when's appropriate. So my name's Hayley Barden, and I'm the principal of Interwork for EKC Interwork, and Kirsty McChesney is our head of employability, as I say, who's been instrumental in developing this programme. So just a little bit of context. I think James and Lara have explained very clearly how we have collaborated and put the programme together. So just a little bit about Interwork's bespoke offers that we can put together for you. So EKC Group now comprises of 8 business units, which is made up of 6 static colleges and 3 additional business units, of which Interwork is one. We provide a range of adult education, community and employability provision, and we also have a prison education arm at East Church on the Isle of Sheppey that offer a range of vocational programmes. We already have a job brokering service within Interwork, and this would now provide Kickstart candidates with post-placement support from a designated job broker to help match them to their suitable employment opportunities. Our service works similar to that of a recruitment agency in that we match the right person to the right employer. So we work very closely with the young person and the employers. We also offer further advice and guidance, and if appropriate, national careers service interventions to promote learning and employment destinations. We have an advocacy support, which entails linking a young person with our student support progression service to address any holistic needs. You'll be aware many young people have a variety of potential barriers around housing, health, well-being, housing, all sorts of things. So that service acts as a sort of a mediator, if you like, to support that young person into sustainable employment. We also run a range of maths, English, ICT programs, because you'll be aware that this is very often a barrier for some young people to access employment. So we put that as an add-on. We do offer bespoke employability customer service training to develop effective communication skills and resilience for the workplace, tailored to the employer's needs and the young person. And we do also include sector-specific training, which could be care, retail, hospitality, security, stewarding, sorry. And as a large group, with the colleges over a large geographical location, we can provide referral routes into our mainstream FE provision, vocation opportunities, which include the trades, apprenticeships and distance learning. So we have a variety of programs that we can offer depending on the needs of the employer. We already work with a lot of employers and tailor make those programs. So we're very much looking forward to working with yourselves and the colleges to drive the Kickstart programme forward. I think we all just want to get started with it now. So Kirsty, I don't know whether there's anything you would like to add.
No, not really. Thank you, Hayley. I think just the key messages are that obviously the support we can offer is very flexible and we can adapt to meet and accommodate individuals and employers' needs. And just to pick up on both James's and Lara's points as well, because our bespoke offers are very different between the colleges, there is a real key unique selling point for employers actually partnering with us, because anything that we can't offer at East Kent College, we can do potential cross referrals into Mid and North Kent College as well.
Absolutely, absolutely. Okay, thank you very much.
Kirsty and Hayley, thank you both very much indeed for that two-hander there. And again, it just sort of really sort of offers that broad, comprehensive package of support, which we're really keen to sort of try and tap into. Okay, so we're going to move to Q&A now, and thank you very much indeed. The questions have been coming in thick and fast, and they're great questions. They are the sort of things that we would have expected based on what you've been told so far and what we've learned along the way. So they're really good. Do keep asking them as we go forward. Just before we get into that, I just want to again have a little sort of chat just to try and put things in context. Remember, the Chamber deals a lot with government grant schemes and loan schemes and intervention and stuff like that, and we have a sort of fairly good pedigree and experience in that. And one thing that we always try and make sure employers understand is, and businesses understand, is that there is no such thing as a free lunch. There is always a reason, some transactional relationship as to why you are being given money by the government, and they want something in return. And in this case, they want to try and stem the high levels of unemployment in the youth, which is going to come about as a result of COVID-19. That's why they're giving you a grant, not to help you financially. There are other schemes that are allegedly in place to do that. And we're not going to get into that debate right now, but I know that's another contentious issue. But this grant is provided to ensure that the young people have work opportunities as we go into the sort of economic hardships that we can expect in the next 6 months. So always keep that in mind. That's the purpose of all of this, and that's sort of really what has led to us as a chamber setting out our stall as a gateway organisation. And gateway organisations, of which others are available, the FSB have one, and so do other organisations. And in fact, SEK are a gateway organisation in their own right as well. But we have taken a view on what we understand of the programme and what we see as the needs of the young people and also the business. And so we have set out our stall, and that is what we've been developing over the last few months, and we will sort of try to expand on that as we answer some of these questions. But I just want to put that into context really, so that we knew where we're coming from. Okay, moving now to questions. So Eileen, are you still with us?
Yes, I am.
Fantastic, great stuff, excellent. Okay, so I'm going to run up back to the top here. So well, let's run through the first ones. Go on,
Lisa, is it Lisa? So
yes.
Lisa, you asked what specific criteria is used to determine financial stability. I presume that's in terms of applying for the Kickstart scheme. So as a gateway organisation, we use the Spotlight tool. It's a Cabinet Office-based tool, and it cross-references various bits of information to ensure financial stability of that gateway organisation who has put forward a bid on an employer's behalf. But equally, we use the Spotlight tool that links into things like Companies House, and we check the financial viability of an employer, for example, that there's no risk of bankruptcy, etc. Because the last thing we'd want to do is to put a young person into an employment place, and then that falls through and they're left out on the cold, basically. So there's a number of various things the Spotlight tools checks, but it's all to do with the financial stability and viability of businesses and gateway organizations. I hope that answers your question.
And I think also it's probably safe to mention, obviously, the consideration we're given to the last 6 months. Some businesses, that obviously their turnover has been dramatically infected, and therefore it's going to sort of have a dent on the books. But that will be taken into consideration, because I think we know that some of that downturn in turnover is just as a result of the artificial restrictions that have been put in place around that business. So as soon as they're released, then potentially that business will be able to return to its normal trading profitability and sustainability. So a degree of sort of flexibility and sort of holistic approach will be taken into consideration there.
Absolutely, okay. Tudor. Yeah, thanks for that clarity on that bit. Who else have I got? Joe, I think. Joe Malpass, you applied back in mid-September. Can you estimate when I expect to hear? Joe, I wish I could give you an answer. I think most of them are about 2 months behind at the moment. So most of the applications, as I say, they are putting more resource in the team. More people are joining the team. They've put out expressions of interest literally yesterday for more people to join the team. So the team is everly expanding just to try and pull that work back by Christmas. I was in a national meeting this morning, and they have said that they would want to be on top of everything in 4 weeks' time. So if that is any help, I hope it is. But it is a bit difficult to give you an idea of when you will hear back, basically.
And I think also, again, all credit to Eileen, yourself, and to Sarah. We understand that some of the applications the Chamber has put forward, a batch of them have been dealt with, and we're sort of just waiting to see that work through. So hopefully we'll see that sort of logjam start to free up a little bit more. Got another question from Joe here, which is around the £1,500 upfront cost. Will it need to be repaid if the employment ceases before the 6 months? So, and there's another question later, which I guess ties in. So if the candidate is not suitable, so either they're not suitable or they leave or whatever, what happens to that £1,500?
From what I've heard, they do not look to recall it, basically. If the person turns out to be not suitable, they don't look to recall the £1,500, because part of that £1,500 was for the setting up of the payroll and the onboarding costs. So yeah, the last I heard on that wouldn't be recalled, but this is an agile process, so they're learning and adding to it as they go. So at the moment, that's where it sits. So I'd be surprised if they change that, to be honest, because it would seem very unfair if you've selected somebody and they turn out not to be the person you thought so.
Yeah, I think bearing in mind, we are dealing with individuals who are at risk of long-term unemployment, and there may be a number of different reasons as to why they don't stay the course, and so everything is recognised that the employer isn't really going to be penalised for that. If that doesn't work, can they reapply? Yeah,
absolutely. If that candidate doesn't work out, you can straight away apply for another candidate, and again will attract the same amount for the new candidate as you've had for the one that left.
Excellent. We have got some FAQ, which the DWP very kindly have produced, and we published that onto the Chambers page, and Lauren's going to post that link into the live chat area for you later, so you can have a look through. Mark, you've been very patient. Again, you are one of those many organisations which took up the mantle very early on, 11th of September, but no word. Again, the frustrations are shared. We have a very accurate list of everybody. We are making sure that we try and keep you in touch and up to date with the latest developments. If you haven't heard from us, possibly because of a spam filter or something where the email hasn't got through, please do email Lauren at kickstart@kentonvictorchamber.co.uk, and we'll try and see where you are and where the progress is. We're keen to try and keep you as informed as possible.
Yeah, and I did have a chase on the Invicta this morning, actually. So I think there is some progress. So you're on the cusp, really, of having a certain amount of roles, accepted. So that is moving forward. Yeah,
that's really good. Chris has got a question about timing. So his business may not be ready to join the scheme until Q2 2021. What happens if application numbers exceed? Is there a limit? Will it stop at 250k?
I don't think so. As long as it's included in the grant bids that the Chamber puts in, and we accept it as that's going to be one of those roles, and it doesn't really matter when it starts then, as long as it's included and it's been accepted.
Okay, so the suggestion might be to sort of register early.
Yeah, absolutely, because the job can start at any time, but as long as you get in there and get that, we recognise that as a Kickstart vacancy, then that at least you're on the books then as such, rather than waiting till too late. And we can't say what will happen. You know, pots of money are not infinite, are they? So no, yeah, I can't predict which way that would go.
Yeah, the Chancellor seems to keep putting his hand down the back of the sofa and finding another few billion here and there. Yeah, so you never know. Yeah. You never know. Some money perhaps for directors and dividends, but that's another story again. Okay. I know why Mark's asked this question, because Mark works for Arriva.
I know Mark.
And Mark provides travel vouchers. So nothing like a bit of covert questioning. So yeah, if a placement is paid in week 6 and they don't own their own car. Now basically, we've been in conversation with Mark as a gateway organisation, because if you do find a suitable candidate and they have no effective means of travel or transportation for whatever, a travel of getting themselves there, we have got an arrangement with Mark at Arriva, who we can then maybe use some of that grant money to secure travel vouchers for that individual, so they can get to your work of employment. It's a place of employment rather. So that's an option, and I think we would introduce that as a gateway organisation. We would introduce that to you once you've selected your candidate and you're happy. And then obviously, if there is an issue with them getting to and from their place of work, and a travel voucher is the answer, then we can put you in touch with Mark, and he can help sort of try and put that in place.
Could I add there as well, Tudor, that for young people, when they start work, we can offer them up to 4 weeks money to pay for their first travel card. We also offer them clothing if they need a uniform, not PPE, of course, specifically, but if they need uniform or they need specific clothing to start work, we offer that as well. So if you do take a young person on, they need to get hold of their work coach as soon as possible, so we can sort that out for them.
Excellent. Okay. I didn't know. That's really useful. Great, Mark. Thank you very much indeed.
That's great. Okay. Thank you.
How will payments be made to the employers by back to the business accounts? Does there need to be an application monthly? Right. So that's very much something that we're working on at the moment. We will be paying you buybacks. So as part of the process, we will enter into a grant agreement between the Gateway organisation, ourselves the Chamber, and you, the business. Within that, we will confirm the amounts that are going to be paid, and then through the magic of the RTI, real-time information, we will be able to know that the individual has been paid, and then we will send a backs transfer for that amount a month in arrears. Obviously, because it's in arrears, it means if the candidate leaves for whatever reason or the employment is terminated, we can make the appropriate adjustment based on the amount of time that they had actually worked during that period. So we are very confident that we have it very quick and very set up. We're mindful that we are just sort of in the line of backs here, and therefore once the financial ball gets passed to us, it's really important we get it straight out to you as a business, because you're having to sort of upfront that cost initially on the wages, but we'll make sure that it is certainly on time and goes into the right account. But part of that process will be making sure that we collect the appropriate bank details prior to signing off with the agreement. And that was your question, Joe. Let's have a look now. So where do we get to on here? Q2, Q placement 6 weeks, so car payments. We've got a question from Richard now. So we already have plans in place to cover wraparound support. Are we required to use SEK via an invite? Okay. Now that raised a couple of questions. Tim, you've also raised a question around 50%. I mentioned was the figure. It wouldn't be more than that. The actual cost is yet to be determined. And quite right, you're saying, well, hang on a second, the Chamber's already getting paid £300 for this. Why is it going to take a further £750? All genuine questions. And I'm glad you asked it, because it gives me a chance to explain and to clarify. So yes, £300 to set up all of this as a program to manage all of the four-way partnership between JCP, Job Coach, the business, the DWP, and the training provider. To set up all the bank details and backs details to handle will approximately be something like between £4 and £5 million of grant payments through our accounts. So I think any of you that are in business, you'll know £300 per placement. That's quite lean in terms of the amount of workload that's got to be done. So we can't take any training provision out of that £300 because it's just not viable. And interestingly, those that applied early to be gateway organisations, we've seen a lot of them fall by the wayside once they've realised what the actual obligations and cost implications are to them as an institution. We went into this with our eyes open. We were very aware, and therefore, we have made a commitment to this programme for the duration. So we have already invested to some degree as an organisation at cost and at risk. But we believe in the principle behind this, and we think it's the right thing to do. So why the 50%? Again, that is a figure that will be no more than that at this stage. And the reason why hopefully will have become apparent when you heard the presentations from the training providers about the level and depth of in-work provision. What our hope and ambition is that those individuals that you take on a work placement will receive sufficient and comprehensive in-work support training that they will very quickly become an asset to you as an organisation, and you will either want to employ them or they will be extremely employable through another organisation, and therefore we have achieved both our longer term objectives in terms of supporting the economy, but also delivered our obligation and moral duty, if you like, to that young person. So it sounds quite grandiose, but it is genuine, sincere. Now, we are in the process, again, because we're developing things, we have been in the process of trying to identify the maximum and the optimum amount of in-work support training that we feel should be delivered to the young person. And we are just scoping that final costing, which is why I gave you sort of parameter rather than a specific price. But we will clarify that as soon as possible. The next question, which relates to this, of course, is, is it a requirement? Do you have to? And I think, Richard, you've also highlighted here, Richard Hagan highlighted that you've already put in place your own training program. You've identified bits and pieces that you want to do and that you're quite comfortable to try and deliver that yourself. Because you've all applied to the chamber sort of without full disclosure, you weren't fully aware of what was on offer, I think it would be wrong of us to try and suddenly impose this on you retrospectively. So what we are in the process, and I would again stress this is a draft strategy at the moment, but what we're in the process of doing is trying to evaluate some means of audit or compliance check. So if you are proposing to provide training for that young person yourself, we are developing a way in which we can satisfy ourselves that the young person is going to be disadvantaged. They are actually going to receive a level of service, certainly, if not better, at least equivalent to what it is that we would be providing through the colleges and through SEK. We think actually for what you get from the training providers, the fees that we're talking about, the sub 50%, is incredible value for money of 6 months worth of training. So we've been very keen not to sort of profit from all of this. This is really about doing the right thing and making sure that the young person and the business get the best of both worlds. There was another question here as well around we were planning on using this £1,500 to invest in kit. Now, based on what we were saying earlier, this is a work placement, and yes, there will be reasonable overheads will be incurred, whether that's a chair or a desk or a laptop. But we would expect, if we were doing some sort of audit and some sort of compliance check, we would expect that the training was certainly of the right standard, and if it could be evidence that it was of the right standard that would benefit that young person long term, then yeah, I think that's going to be fine because you could deliver that yourself. What we're keen to avoid, and this goes back to my very earlier comment around the government wants something in return. This is not a grant for you to help your business. This is a grant to incentivize you to take on a young person. That £1,500, if you spent that on some new laptops and some new bits and pieces, and then the young person left after 6 months, you've benefited from a laptop and some investment in kit. But actually, was it being used by the young person? So you can understand why we are cautious. We're not inflexible, and we're not trying to put in barriers, but we just want to satisfy ourselves as a gateway organisation that we are, of course, making sure the provision is there. Now, this will develop, and as the plan becomes more clear in our mind, we'll certainly share that with you. But again, we're not looking to impose that on you retrospectively, but we hope that by the time we present you with the final offer and the sort of final pricing, you will see that it offers real good value for money, and it's something that you'll be quite happy to pick up on. Okay, let's go back to some of these questions here. Eileen, have you seen any in there that you wanted to pick up on at all? I'm just scanning now quickly through my list.
I'm just getting to the bottom here.
So I think there's similar here. So who pays? So Suzanne Shaw, who pays for the wraparound services? Are these compulsory to taking someone on the Kickstart scheme? As I just highlighted, it probably will be at some point, but I think again, retrospectively, that would be wrong for us to try and do that. We were certainly presented it as an offer at this time, but we're really keen that we engage with that you as an employer engage with the colleges because of that additional value that's there in terms of the apprenticeships and other bits and pieces as well, and certainly all the courses, the mandatory courses that you may need to put that person on. Certainly, if you're going to take them on long term. Okay.
There's one there from Janet Bristow I can pick up. Janet, you've asked whether you're as a partnership can be part of the process and get involved in the scheme. And as I think I mentioned earlier in my presentation, sole traders and partnerships, we are looking at those and how we can involve them in the scheme. So I'm hoping that something will come out shortly on that.
Excellent. Yeah, that was I think that came as a surprise to all of us initially. I think we all sort of just assumed it was going to be sole traders, of which we have a huge number here in Kent. In fact, the statistic for you, I think 98% of businesses in Kent employ 10 employees or less, 5 employees or less. Therefore, we have a lot that are trading on that status. So again, really helpful that DWP, Eileen and the rest of her colleagues have been sort of feeding that back to central London, where we're seeing those sort of adjustments being made, and hopefully we'll see some accommodation for that fairly soon. Okay. I think,
Chris, you've asked if the grants are classified as state aid, and I would think the answer is probably not.
The fifth, actually, hang on a second. The £1,500 would be, yes, but not the 6,000, because the 6,000 obviously is paying for a particular service, so there's no pecuniary advantage, but the £1,500 would.
Okay.
In the current climate, the state aid has been increased to €800,000 over a 3-year period. Now, unless you are spending a huge amount of money or claiming huge amounts under the furlough scheme, it's unlikely you're going to reach that upper limit. But that is only a temporary upper limit at the moment, which will no doubt sort of be decreased sometime next year. But I think the 1,500 probably you're going to be okay on that in the short term.
Thanks, Tudor.
And yeah, Richard, just responding to your follow-up on that about the rapidly change. Yeah, we recognise it does change the position. A lot of you have sort of stepped forward on one particular premise, and therefore this is changing it. So we're not going to be unreasonable here, and I think we recognise that as long as we feel and can satisfy ourselves that you have adequate training provision in place, then obviously we're going to be open-minded about that and keep that option open. Okay. I think we are coming to the end of my questions here. So Ruth Panel has a question here. Asked a question about chamber vet training, was told could be optional before I applied for the grant. Yep, and that's fine. We haven't sort of moved from that position. I wanted to use the £1,500 for specific skills, e.g. a 2-day legal admin course. A 2-day legal admin course. I guess my first thing is to turn to the colleges and say, do you have anything like that at all? So Lara, you're nodding your head there. Can I just bring you in, because we haven't had a chance to get some questions your way?
Hi, yes. I don't know if we could do it over 2 days. That's the only thing. We do have a legal secretarial course that we run here at the college, but if it's something that the employer particularly wanted, then obviously we've got the expertise to do it. So I'll just need to go back to my curriculum manager in that area to find out if that is deliverable and, you know, how much that might cost.
Excellent. And I think, again, this is one of the reasons why we sort of come to the colleges. We're hoping that actually there's quite a lot of provision in depth there. So more than welcome to email in those questions specifically around the courses and the training that might be on offer. And we could possibly save you some money. Okay. Mark Rose, you asked a question about supported internship program that you're running. Could we signpost them? The problem we have, not problem, but bearing in mind the qualifying criteria for the young person, they need to be currently claiming universal credit and be at risk of long-term unemployment. So if they're coming off of one program and straight into another, unless they're already claiming universal credit and already registered, it's unlikely. Eileen, I'm going to come to you just to clarify on that point.
Yeah, they would need to be on universal credit. I think, Mark, we might have a conversation on the sidelines about this, actually. I'll have a little chat with you separately.
Sorry, Eileen, I've given Mark my email, so perhaps we can discuss that in a bit more detail.
Brilliant. Yeah, lovely. Thank you, Lauren.
That's brilliant. Okay. Okay. So, yeah, Ruth, that's great. I think we are probably coming to the end of the questions. I can't see any more tricky questions that need to be answered. As I said, we are more than happy to sort of follow up on any questions that you have here. But so on that basis, at 3:28 or thereabouts, I'm going to start to bring things to a close. Fantastic questions. That's great. Oh, that's Molly saying that. Thank you very much. Brilliant. So Eileen, thank you very much indeed for your time and patience and contribution here today, and for your continued work to sort of try and bring this program to full fruition. Thank you
for
also,
inviting me.
You're very welcome, and I look forward to continuing to work with you. Thank you also to Lara, Hayley, Kirsty, and James, who's still there somewhere, for your involvement, and Emma, of course, for your very comprehensive update. I think in the chat I've mentioned that the training providers, we will all be getting together again to continue to sort of just work on and refine and hone the offer, so that when we come back at you with the finished article, it will be so compelling you won't have any concerns at all. But hopefully that'll be the answer. And thank you to Lauren for joining us today, and also to Molly for hosting the event. I hope you've all found it useful. As I say, there's lots of information to sort of still get answers to. If you haven't heard from us recently, please do get in touch with Lauren at Kickstart at kentinvictorchamber.co.uk, and we will do our best. Lauren, yes, jump in.
I was just going to add in there on the website, Kent and Victor Chamber website, under the Kickstart banner, there is information there. Obviously, it will be under the FAQ tab, and we're continually aiming to update that. So sort of keep sending your questions in. The more feedback we can give to you guys, the better. Obviously, the scheme is essentially in its infancy, so we'll keep putting your questions and answers up there.
Brilliant. And again, thank you very much indeed, everybody, for your patience. Bear with us while we get this to you and make sure it's exactly what it should be and does with it. We hope it will do. Thank you very much indeed. Have a great rest of the day. Thank you and goodbye.